Sir, when was the last time you ate?
The old man lifted his head. His coat was filthy. His hands trembled. Around him, 200 guests in formal attire. No one had looked at him all night. He whispered,
I don't remember.
Una stared at him. 2 loaves of bread in her apron, one for herself, one for her grandmother at home, ill with lupus, waiting. That was all they had tonight. She looked at the bread, then at him, her grandmother's face, the empty fridge, the unpaid prescriptions. Her hand hesitated. Then she placed both loaves of bread in front of him.
Please eat.
The 200 guests ignored the man. Only one person stopped, a poor black girl. But what she didn't know about him would change her life forever. 12 hours earlier, Una Green's alarm went off at 4:45 a.m. Not because she wanted to wake up, but because she couldn't afford not to. She had 2 jobs. Neither one paid enough. Together, they barely kept the lights on. She rolled off a mattress on the floor. No bed frame, just a fitted sheet tucked around the corners, and walked barefoot across the cold linoleum to the bathroom. The mirror had a crack running down the left side. She brushed her teeth, tied her hair back tight, and stared at herself for exactly 3 seconds. That was all the time she gave herself in the morning. 3 seconds. Then move. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that doubled as a living room. Everything in it was clean. Not new, not nice, but clean. Una kept it that way because her grandmother Betty always said, poverty is a circumstance, dirty is a choice. Betty Moore sat in her recliner in the corner, 69 years old, oxygen tube under her nose, a thin blanket across her lap even though it wasn't cold, because lupus made her body feel things that weren't there. Some mornings her joints locked so badly she couldn't hold a cup. Some mornings she woke up and pretended she was fine, just so Una wouldn't worry. This was one of those mornings. Baby, you don't need to work 2 jobs for me, Betty said, watching Una iron her one good white shirt, the only one without a stain. Una smiled without looking up. Grandma, I'm not working 2 jobs for you. I'm working 2 jobs because I like being tired. Betty didn't laugh. She knew. On the refrigerator door, a past-due electric bill, a rent notice marked final, and a small handwritten note that said Culinary School Fund. Next to it, taped to the wall, a glass jar. Inside the jar, maybe $40 in crumpled bills and coins. That jar had been there for 2 years. It never got much fuller. Una tucked the iron shirt into her bag, kissed Betty's forehead, and said, Tonight I'm working a big gala at the Grand Summit. They pay cash same night. And I'll bring bread home for both of us, okay? Betty nodded. Be careful with those rich people. They won't even see me, Grandma. She meant it as a joke, but it came out too honest. Sunrise Bakery, 5:30 a.m. Una clocked in, tied her apron, and started pulling trays from the oven. The smell of fresh bread filled the small shop, warm, golden, the only good thing about waking up before the sun. Her co-worker, Lorraine Taylor, was already at the counter, boxing up orders and humming something off-key. You doing that catering thing tonight? Lorraine asked. Yeah, need the money bad. Betty's lupus prescription is due Friday. I'm $60 short. Lorraine looked at her. Girl, you're always $60 short. 70, actually. But who's counting? They both laughed. The kind of laugh that wasn't really funny, just necessary. Lorraine leaned over. Listen, those big galas, they throw away more food than we sell in a week. When the night's done, grab some rolls. Nobody cares. That's how it works. Una nodded. That was the plan. Work the shift, get paid cash, take home leftover bread for her and Betty. Simple. Survivable. 6:48 p.m., Grand Summit Hotel. Una entered through the service door, the one in the back alley next to the dumpsters. Inside, marble floors, gold fixtures, floral arrangements taller than her that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent. She stopped for a second, just 1 second, to look. Then Gerald Davis appeared, event director, 45, pressed suit, thin smile that never reached his eyes. He scanned the line of temp catering staff like he was checking livestock. He looked at Una's shoes, slightly worn at the toe. "You," he said, "back tables, far section. Stay away from the main guests." Una nodded. She didn't argue. She clipped on her name badge, picked up a tray, and walked into the ballroom. The first thing she saw? A champagne tower, 6 tiers high, catching the chandelier light like a column of liquid gold. The second thing she saw? An old man in a stained coat, sitting alone at a corner table, trembling. Nobody was looking at him. Not yet. Una worked, carried trays, refilled water glasses, cleared plates. Smile, nod, disappear. That was the job. Be useful, be invisible. A guest bumped into her tray. Champagne spilled across Una's shirt, soaking through to her skin. The woman in the emerald gown looked at Una like she was the stain. "Watch where you're going." "I'm sorry, ma'am." Una wiped her shirt with a napkin, kept moving. She didn't have the luxury of being offended. She was here for the cash. She was here for the bread. That was it. But every time she crossed the ballroom, her eyes drifted back to the same corner. The old man. Still sitting there. Same stained coat. His fingers curled on the tablecloth like he was holding on to something no one else could see. His lips moved, whispering words to no one. A dry cough shook his whole body every few minutes, the kind that comes from sleeping outside too many nights. His face was pale. Not white person pale, sick pale. The kind of pale that means you haven't had a real meal in days. A waiter walked past his table, picked up the empty place setting in front of him, walked away without a word, like clearing space for a ghost. Diane Crawford, diamonds on her neck, champagne in her hand, leaned toward her husband loud enough for 3 tables to hear. "Someone really should remove that man. He's making people uncomfortable." Nobody removed him. Nobody helped him either. He just sat there, shaking, invisible. 2 invisible people in a room full of gold. Una's shift was almost over. Her feet ached. Her stomach had been growling for 2 hours. She reached into her apron and felt the 2 loaves of bread, one for her, one for Betty. The plan was simple. Finish the shift, collect the cash, walk to the bus stop, go home, eat with Grandma. Simple, survivable. She looked at the old man one last time. His hands were trembling worse now. Not from cold, from hunger. His head was dipping forward, catching itself, dipping again, like his body was giving up before his mind did. His eyes were wet, unfocused, darting around the room like a child lost in a place too big, too loud, too bright. And then he looked directly at her. Not past her, not through her, at her. Like she was the first person in that room who actually existed. Una stopped. 200 people, laughing, eating, clinking glasses around her. And one old man, starving, 10 feet away, looking at her like she was the last face left in the world. She reached into her apron. Betty's face, the oxygen tube, the empty fridge, the unpaid prescriptions. If she gave this bread away, neither of them would eat tonight. She knew that. Her fingers wrapped around the loaves and didn't move for 5 full seconds. Then she walked over, sat down across from him, pulled out both loaves, everything she had, and placed them in front of a stranger. The old man looked up, his eyes focused just for a moment, like someone turned on a small light behind them. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracked. "You remind me of someone kind." "What's your name, sir?" "Ed. Edmund. I think I'm supposed to be somewhere, but I can't remember where." "Well, Edmund, you're right here. That's enough for now." She sat with him while he ate. She didn't eat. She didn't take a single piece back. She watched a hungry man finally have a meal, and something in her chest unclenched, like this was the only thing that had made sense all day. Then Gerald appeared. "What do you think you're doing?" "Sir, this man needs help. He doesn't know where—" "I don't care. You're staff. You sit with guests. You're done." Gerald turned to Edmund. "You're not on the guest list. Leave, now." Edmund tried to stand. His legs buckled. He grabbed the table edge and missed. Gerald snapped at security. "Both of them. Back door." Una caught Edmund's arm before he hit the floor. The bread tumbled off the table. She picked it up, brushed it off, and pressed it back into his shaking hands. Security walked them through the kitchen, past the dishwashers, past the dumpsters, out the service exit. The door slammed shut. Gerald straightened his tie and walked back into the light. The alley behind the Grand Summit Hotel smelled like grease and garbage. A single bulb above the service door flickered yellow, barely enough light to see 3 feet ahead. Edmund stood next to Una, swaying. His legs hadn't fully recovered from nearly collapsing inside. His coat hung off him like it belonged to a bigger man, a man he used to be. He blinked at the alley walls, then at the sky, then at Una, like he was trying to solve a puzzle with no edges. Where am I?" "We're outside the hotel, Edmund. They asked us to leave." "Hotel?" He looked at his hands. "I don't remember a hotel." A dry cough tore through his chest, then another. He bent forward, bracing himself against the brick wall, his whole body shaking. When the coughing stopped, he stayed bent over. Like straightening up took more energy than he had left. Una looked down the alley toward the street. Her bus stop was 4 blocks east. If she walked fast, she could catch the 11:15 and be home by midnight. Betty would be asleep. The fridge would still be empty. But at least she'd be safe, in her own bed, with another day to figure things out. She looked at Edmund. He was staring at the ground, completely still. A 74-year-old man in a dark alley at 10-something at night, with no phone, no wallet, no idea where he lived. If she left him here, what would happen? Who would come? Nobody came for him inside that ballroom. Nobody was coming out here either. "Edmund, do you remember where you live?" He shook his head slowly. His eyes were wet. "Is there someone I can call for you? Family? Anyone?" "I think I had a daughter. I think." His voice trailed off. He touched his coat pocket. The bread was still there. He held it like it mattered more than anything he owned. Una closed her eyes. 1 second. 2. Then she put her arm under his and lifted him off the wall. "Okay, we're going to the police station. They'll help find your people." "I don't want to be trouble." "You're not trouble, Edmund. Come on, lean on me." The nearest station was 8 blocks west, the opposite direction from her bus stop. She had no money for a cab. Her phone was at 12%. Her feet had been standing for 9 hours. None of that mattered right now. They walked, slowly. Edmund's steps were short and unsteady, like every block cost him something he couldn't get back. Twice he stopped, confused, looking around like the streets had rearranged themselves. Once he called Una a different name, Clara, and she didn't correct him. She just said, "Yes, I'm here. Keep walking. At block 5, Edmund's legs gave out. He sank onto a bus bench, breathing hard. Una sat next to him, pulled the bread from his pocket, broke off a small piece, and handed it to him. Eat a little, just a little, then we'll keep going. He ate. She didn't. They made it to the station at 11:40 p.m. Una walked Edmund inside, sat him in a chair, and told the officer at the desk, "This man is lost. I think he has memory problems. He can't remember where he lives. His name is Edmund Wilson. Please help him find his family." The officer looked at them, a young black woman in a stained catering uniform, holding up a white old man she'd never met before tonight. "Are you family?" "No, I just met him tonight." The officer paused, then typed the name into the system. A red flag appeared on screen. Missing person, filed by Katherine Wilson, Wilson Capital Holdings. The officer's face changed. Una sat in a plastic chair against the wall of the police station. The clock above the front desk read 11:53 p.m. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Edmund sat next to her, quiet now, his hands folded over the bread in his lap, like a prayer he couldn't finish. She didn't have to stay. The officer had Edmund's name. The system was doing its thing. She could walk out right now, catch the last bus if she ran, and be home before Betty woke up wondering where she was. But Edmund's hand was shaking again, and every few minutes he turned his head toward Una, just slightly, like he was checking if she was still there. So she stayed. An officer brought Edmund a cup of water. Una thanked him. Edmund didn't drink it. He just held the cup with both hands, feeling the warmth. Una reached over and steadied the cup so it wouldn't spill. "Edmund, your family is coming. You're going to be okay." He looked at her. For a second, his eyes were sharp, really sharp, like the fog lifted just long enough for him to see her clearly. "You're a good person," he said. Then the fog came back. He looked at the cup like he'd forgotten how it got there. At 12:35 a.m., a man in a dark suit walked through the station doors. Philip Anderson, private investigator, hired by Katherine Wilson 3 years ago to find her father. He'd been searching ever since. Shelters, hospitals, morgues, John Doe reports across 6 states, and now a police station in downtown Atlanta. Because a girl in a catering uniform walked the old man in. Philip knelt in front of Edmund, studied his face, checked a photograph on his phone. His jaw tightened. "It's him," he said into his phone. "Ma'am, it's your father." Una watched from her chair. She didn't know who Philip was. She didn't know who was on the other end of that call. She just saw a man who clearly recognized Edmund, and that was enough. She stood up, walked to Edmund, placed her hand on his shoulder. "Your people are here, Edmund. You're going home." Edmund looked up at her. He held out the bread. What was left of it, crumbled, pressed flat from being carried all night. "Take it back," he said. "You need it." Una shook her head. "That's yours. You keep it." She turned to the officer at the desk. "He's been coughing a lot tonight. Please make sure they check him out." Then she walked to the door. Philip called after her. "Miss, wait. Can I get your name? A phone number?" Una stopped. She thought for a second. "I'm just glad he's okay." She pushed the door open and stepped out into the night. 12:51 a.m. No bus. No money for a cab. 12% battery. Not worth wasting on a call. Una Green walked home. Alone. 8 blocks back the way she came, then 4 more past her bus stop, then 6 more to her building. Her feet burned with every step. Her stomach was hollow. The night air was cold on her still damp shirt. She got home at 1:34 a.m. Betty was asleep. The fridge was still empty. Una drank a glass of water, changed out of her stained shirt, and lay on the mattress on the floor. She didn't cry. She was too tired to cry. 90 minutes after Una left the station, Katherine Wilson walked in, 52 years old, CEO of Wilson Capital Holdings. A woman who could buy the Grand Summit Hotel and turn it into a parking lot if she wanted to. She hadn't slept. Her driver had broken 4 traffic laws getting there. She saw Edmund sitting in the same plastic chair. He looked thin. He looked lost. He looked like 3 years of streets and shelters and forgetting had worn him down to almost nothing. Katherine knelt on the station floor and took his hands. "Dad, it's me. It's Katherine." Edmund stared at her. His eyes searched her face, reaching for something, some thread of recognition. It came and went like a signal too weak to hold. "I know you," he said softly. "I think I know you." Katherine's composure cracked. She pressed her forehead against his hands and stayed there. Then she looked up. "Who brought him here?" The officer checked his notes. A young woman, black, early 20s, wearing a catering uniform. She walked him here on foot, stayed over an hour, wouldn't leave her name or number, just asked us to make sure he got medical attention. Katherine stared at the officer. "She walked him here?" 8 blocks, ma'am, on foot, in the middle of the night. Katherine looked at the bread crumbled in Edmund's lap. Not gala food, not catered, plain bread rolls, the kind you'd find at a neighborhood bakery. "Who is she?" The officer flipped back a page. She did mention her first name, Una. The next morning, Katherine called the Grand Summit Hotel. She wanted to thank whoever had helped her father at the gala, to find this girl named Una, to understand what happened. The call was routed to Gerald Davis. Gerald cleared his throat and delivered his version, smooth, practiced, concerned. "When I noticed the gentleman seemed disoriented, I personally intervened to ensure his comfort and safety. I arranged for him to be looked after before he left the premises. It's our standard of care here at the Grand Summit." He did not mention Una. He did not mention firing her. He did not mention dragging Edmund out through the service door next to the dumpsters. Katherine was moved. She asked for Gerald's full name and mailing address. 3 days later, a check arrived at his apartment, $25,000, a personal thank you from Katherine Wilson. Gerald deposited it the same afternoon. But something nagged at Katherine, a detail that didn't fit. Gerald said he'd arranged for Edmund to be looked after, but the police report said a young woman, not hotel staff, not security, had walked Edmund to the station on foot. If Gerald had handled everything, why was her father wandering the streets with a girl in a catering uniform? Katherine picked up the phone and called Philip Anderson. "I need you to pull the security footage from the Grand Summit. Every camera, every angle, the full night." Philip said, "What are we looking for?" Katherine paused. The truth. Philip pulled every frame, lobby cameras, ballroom angles, service hallway, back alley, parking lot. He laid the footage out on a timeline, minute by minute, and let it speak. 8:47 p.m. Una approaches Edmund's table, sits down, places 2 loaves of bread in front of him. 8:54 p.m. Gerald confronts Una, calls security. 8:56 p.m. Security escorts both Una and Edmund out through the service exit. 8:57 p.m. Gerald straightens his tie, returns to the ballroom. 8:58 p.m. Outside camera. Una holds Edmund upright in the alley. They start walking. 9:03 p.m. Gerald laughs with a guest near the champagne tower. Philip added one final note to his report. At no point did Gerald Davis assist, contact, or acknowledge the elderly man. The only person who helped Edmund Wilson that night was the woman Gerald fired for doing it. Katherine watched the footage alone in her office. She watched it twice. The second time, she didn't blink. Then she said, "Find her." Philip found Una in 2 days. Her address, her employer, her grandmother's medical records, lupus, stage 3, monthly immunosuppressant prescriptions averaging $840. Her bank balance, $91. A black town car pulled up outside Una's building on a Wednesday afternoon. Philip knocked. Una opened the door, still in her bakery apron, flour on her hands. "Ms. Green, Katherine Wilson would like to meet you. She's the daughter of the man you helped." Una's face shifted. Not excitement, not hope. Worry. Edmund. Is he okay? Did they find out what's wrong with him? Philip paused. In 15 years of investigative work, he had knocked on a lot of doors and delivered a lot of news. People asked about money. People asked about lawyers. People asked what was in it for them. Nobody ever asked if the old man was okay. "He's safe, Ms. Green. He's with his daughter." Una exhaled. Her shoulders dropped 2 inches. Good. That's all I needed to know. "She'd still like to meet you." Una looked back into the apartment. Betty was asleep in the recliner. The fridge hummed in the quiet. The jar with $40 sat on the wall where it always sat. "Okay," she said. "Let me wash my hands." Wilson Capital Holdings, 36th floor. Glass walls, city skyline, furniture that cost more than Una's annual rent. Una walked in wearing her cleanest jeans and a shirt she'd ironed twice. She didn't belong here. She knew it. Everyone in the lobby knew it. But she didn't shrink. She just observed. Katherine's office was large and quiet. No clutter. Everything in its place. Katherine stood when Una entered, which surprised Una because powerful people don't usually stand for anyone. "Ms. Green, thank you for coming." "You can call me Una." Katherine sat. Una sat. For a moment, neither spoke. "I watched the footage from that night," Katherine said. "I saw what you did for my father. I saw what happened to you because of it. And I saw what you did after, walking him 8 blocks in the dark to make sure he was safe." Una nodded. She didn't add anything. "I want to repay you." "You don't owe me anything, ma'am. You lost your wages that night. You lost your job. You've been blacklisted from the catering agencies, all because you helped a man no one else would look at." Una was quiet for a few seconds. Then she said, "I didn't help your father because of who he is. I helped him because he was hungry and lost. That's it. I'd do it again tomorrow." Katherine leaned forward. "Then let me at least fix what was broken. Not as a reward, as what should have happened." Una looked down at her hands. She thought about the jar with $40, the fridge, the prescriptions. "My grandmother has lupus. Her medication is due Friday. I'm short. If you want to help, that's the only thing I'm asking for." Katherine wrote a check for $10,000. Not a reward, a correction. She handed it to Una and said, "This covers the medication, your lost wages, and the rent I know you're behind on. I had Philip look into it. I hope that's okay." Una took the check. She didn't gush. She didn't cry. She folded it carefully, put it in her pocket, and said, "Thank you. I mean it." For 1 week, Una breathed. She paid 2 months of back rent. She filled Betty's prescription. The pharmacist's eyebrows went up when Una paid in full for the first time in a year. She bought groceries, real groceries, eggs, vegetables, chicken, bread. She baked Betty a small cake on Tuesday night for no reason, and Betty laughed so hard she started coughing. Lorraine asked her what happened. Una said, "Somebody helped me back." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. For 1 week, things felt almost okay. Then Gerald Davis found out. It started with a phone call from a colleague at another hotel. "Hey Gerald, someone from Wilson Capital has been asking about you, about the gala night. What's going on?" Gerald's stomach dropped. He hung up and sat in his office for 20 minutes thinking. Not about what he'd done, about how to make sure no one found out. He picked up the phone and called the catering agency that had supplied Una. He spoke to the manager directly. His voice was calm, professional, convincing. "I need to flag a former temp worker, Una Green. She was terminated for unprofessional conduct, harassing a guest, refusing to follow protocol, creating a disturbance. I'd recommend updating her file and notifying your partner agencies." The manager hesitated. "We didn't receive a formal report at the time." "I'm sending one now, backdated to the night of the event. HR oversight. You know how these things slip through during large galas." He typed up the incident report that afternoon. Professional language, official letterhead, every word a lie. Then he made a second call, to a contact at a local tabloid blog. He fed them a story, off the record. A struggling caterer had targeted a confused elderly man at a gala, staged a fake act of kindness, and used it to extract money from the man's billionaire daughter. A calculated con. A sob story, weaponized. The headline went up 2 days later. Catering worker cons billionaire heiress with bread roll sob story. Inside the scam that fooled Katherine Wilson. The article twisted everything. It said Una had researched Edmund beforehand, that she knew exactly who he was, that the bread was a prop, the tears were rehearsed, and the $10,000 check was the real goal all along. It went semi-viral, shared on local Facebook groups, picked up by 2 more gossip sites. Comment sections filled with people who had never met Una, calling her a scammer, a fraud, a con artist. Una saw it on Lorraine's phone during their morning shift at the bakery. Lorraine tried to close the screen, but Una had already read the headline. She read the whole article, standing in the back room, next to the bread oven, still wearing her apron. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't change. She just read it. Every lie, every invented detail, every quote from an anonymous hotel source. And when she was done, she put the phone down and went back to work. She didn't say anything for 2 hours. That evening, Betty saw the article. A neighbor had shared it. Betty read it slowly, her lips moving with each word. When she finished, she looked at Una across the kitchen table. "Baby, come here." Una sat down. Betty took her hands. "The truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be true." Una nodded. But that night, she sat on the front stoop of her building, alone, staring at nothing. She thought about calling Katherine and returning the money, all of it. She didn't want to be called a liar. She didn't want Betty's name dragged through comment sections. She didn't want any of this. Her phone buzzed. A text from Lorraine. "You gave an old man bread. That's the whole story. Don't let anyone rewrite it." Una read it 3 times. Then she went inside, locked the door, and went to bed. She didn't sleep. Katherine saw the article at 6:15 a.m., forwarded by her PR director with a 2-word message. "We have a problem." By 8 a.m., her PR team was in her office. 3 people in expensive suits, talking fast, using words like optics and brand exposure and reputational risk. Their recommendation was unanimous. Distance. Quietly. Release a short statement saying the donation was made in good faith, no further comment, move on. A board member joined by phone. "Katherine, this girl could be anyone. You gave $10,000 based on a security tape and a bread roll. If this plays wrong, it reflects on the company, on all of us." Katherine listened. She didn't interrupt. When they finished, she asked everyone to leave. Alone in her office, she pulled up the footage again. Not the ballroom, the alley camera, the one that showed Una and Edmund standing outside the service door at 8:58 p.m. She watched Una put her arm under Edmund's. She watched them walk, slowly, into the dark. No cameras ahead, no audience, no witnesses. Just a girl helping an old man she didn't know because nobody else would. If Una was running a comm, this was the moment she would have stopped. This was the dark alley where no one was watching, where there was nothing to gain, where the performance could end. But Una kept walking. 8 blocks, in the cold, with a man who couldn't remember his own daughter's name. Katherine closed the video, picked up her phone, dialed Una directly. Una answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was flat, tired, the voice of someone who hadn't slept. "Ms. Green, it's Katherine Wilson." Silence. "I saw the article. I know it's not true, and I know who planted it." Una said nothing for a moment. Then, "Are you calling to ask for the money back?" "No. I'm calling to tell you I'm going to fix this." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to. But I need to ask you something first. Do you trust me?" Una paused. A long pause. The kind that carries weight. "I trust the woman who knelt on a police station floor to hold her father's hands. Yeah, I trust you." Katherine hung up and called Philip. Everything on Gerald Davis. Employment history, complaints, financials, every hotel he's worked at, every person he's stepped on. All of it. Philip delivered within 48 hours. The file was thick. Gerald Davis had been fired from 2 previous hotels, both times for taking credit for subordinates' work. At the second hotel, a young concierge had filed a formal harassment complaint. Gerald had gotten her terminated before the investigation concluded. His expense reports at Grand Summit showed a pattern of inflated charges and unverified receipts. 2 former catering temps had filed complaints about verbal abuse. Both complaints had been lost in the hotel's HR system. And the tabloid article. Philip traced the anonymous hotel source through metadata on the original email sent to the blog editor. The email came from Gerald's personal account. He hadn't even bothered to use a burner. Philip also obtained a sworn statement from the Grand Summit's head of security, confirming the camera footage was authentic, unedited, and time-stamped. Katherine laid everything out on her desk. The footage, the fabricated incident report, the traced email, Gerald's employment history, the security chief's statement. Then she made a decision. She didn't call a press conference to defend herself. She didn't release a statement. She organized something better. A public event at Wilson Capitol, framed as the announcement of a new community philanthropy initiative. She invited local media, community leaders, city council members, and the Grand Summit Hotel's senior management. And she sent a personal invitation to Gerald Davis. Embossed card, gold lettering. "In recognition of your service and compassion, please join us for a special announcement." Gerald received the invitation on a Thursday. He read it twice. He smiled. He told his coworker at the hotel, "Katherine Wilson is honoring me publicly. $25,000 wasn't enough. Now she wants to put me on stage." He went out that weekend and bought a new suit. Charcoal gray, slim fit, Italian shoes to match. He practiced his handshake in the mirror. He had no idea what he was walking into. Wilson Capital Holdings, main conference hall, 4th floor. 200 seats, arranged in a semicircle, facing a stage with a podium and a large screen behind it. Camera crews from 3 local stations. Journalists with notepads. Community leaders, nonprofit directors, 2 city council members. The Grand Summit Hotel's general manager sat in the 3rd row with 2 members of his executive team. Gerald Davis arrived 12 minutes early. Charcoal suit, Italian shoes, hair freshly cut. He shook hands with people he'd never met, introduced himself to a journalist, and took his seat, front row center, where he could be easily seen from the podium. He looked around the room and thought, "This is where I belong." Katherine Wilson took the stage at exactly 10 a.m. No notes, no teleprompter. She wore a simple black dress and no jewelry except her watch. She looked calm, the kind of calm that comes from having made a decision you'll never take back. Thank you all for being here. I want to tell you a story. It's about my father. The room settled. 3 years ago, my father disappeared. His name is Edmund Wilson. He's 74 years old. He suffers from early onset dementia, and one day he walked out of his care facility and we couldn't find him. For 3 years, I searched. My investigators searched. We contacted shelters, hospitals, police departments in 6 states. Nothing. She paused. The room was silent. 3 weeks ago, my father was found. He was sitting alone at a charity gala at the Grand Summit Hotel, confused, hungry, shaking. Over 200 guests attended that event. Not one of them helped him. Not one of them offered him food or water. Not one of them asked if he was okay. Gerald shifted in his seat. He adjusted his tie. He was waiting for the part where Katherine mentioned him. But one person did. Gerald sat up straighter. A 23-year-old catering worker. A temp. She was working that gala to earn cash, same-night pay, because her grandmother's lupus medication was due and she couldn't afford it. She had 2 loaves of bread in her apron, one for herself, one for her grandmother. That was their entire dinner. Katherine let that sit. She gave both loaves to my father, a man she had never met. She gave away the only food she and her sick grandmother had that night, for a stranger. A few people in the audience looked down at their hands. And then she was fired for it. The room stirred. She was escorted out of the building, along with my father, through the service exit, next to the dumpsters. And then, with no money, no phone battery, no ride, she walked my father 8 blocks in the dark to the nearest police station. She stayed with him for over an hour until his identity was confirmed. Then she walked home, alone, at 1 a.m, without leaving her name. Katherine looked at the room. I want to show you what happened that night. The screen behind her lit up. The footage played. No edits, no music, just timestamps and truth. 8:47 p.m. Una sits down across from Edmund, places 2 loaves of bread in front of him. 8:54 p.m. Gerald Davis storms over, points at Una, calls security. 8:56 p.m. Security escorts Una and Edmund through the service hallway, past the kitchen, out the back door. 8:57 p.m. Gerald Davis adjusts his tie, walks back into the ballroom, picks up a glass of champagne. 8:58 p.m. Outside camera. Una holds Edmund upright in the alley. They begin walking into the dark. The footage ended. The screen went black. The room didn't move. Gerald's face had gone white. Not nervous white. Not embarrassed white. Empty white. The kind of white that happens when a man realizes the ground he's standing on was never solid. Katherine turned back to the audience. After that night, I contacted the Grand Summit to thank whoever had helped my father. I was told by the event director, Mr. Gerald Davis, that he personally noticed my father's distress and ensured his safety. He accepted a $25,000 personal thank you check from me for his compassion. She paused. He did not mention Una Green. He did not mention that he fired her. He did not mention that he had my father removed from the building. And when I began asking questions, Mr. Davis fabricated a disciplinary report, backdated, accusing Ms. Green of harassing a guest. He had her blacklisted from every catering agency in the city. And then he contacted a tabloid blog and planted a story calling her a con artist. Katherine held up a folder. I have the original security footage, authenticated by the Grand Summit's own head of security. I have the fabricated incident report with its backdated timestamp. I have the email Mr. Davis sent to the blog, traced to his personal account. And I have statements from 2 former hotel employees who experienced similar behavior from Mr. Davis at previous positions. She set the folder on the podium. I want to say one thing, and I want everyone in this room to hear it. She looked directly at Gerald. Kindness doesn't ask for a resume. It just shows up. Gerald stood. His mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. He looked around the room for a friendly face. There were none. The Grand Summit's general manager was already on his phone. 2 seats away, a journalist was recording. I can explain. The situation was more complicated than... Mr. Davis, the Grand Summit general manager said from the 3rd row, without standing. Don't. Your contract is terminated, effective immediately. Legal will be in contact. Gerald looked at the door. He looked at Katherine. He looked at the camera pointed at his face. Then he walked out. No one followed. No one needed to. The room exhaled. Katherine turned toward the side entrance and nodded. Una stepped out. She was wearing a blue blouse Lorraine had lent her that morning. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Katherine didn't make a spectacle. She walked to Una, stood beside her, and spoke to the room. Una Green didn't help my father because of who he was. She helped him because of who she is. Katherine announced the Una Green Opportunity Grant, a full scholarship to the Culinary Institute of Una's choice, plus a $50,000 community fund in Una's name, dedicated to families facing food insecurity in the city. The room applauded. Una stood still. She breathed. She nodded. Then she leaned toward the microphone. Can I say something? Katherine stepped aside. Una looked at 200 faces looking back at her, the same number as the gala, but this time they were looking at her. That night, I wasn't being brave. I was just being a person. We should all just try to be people to each other. She stepped back. The room stood. 3 weeks later, Maplewood Memory Care Residence, a quiet building on the east side of the city, with wide hallways, warm lighting, and a garden out back where the patients sat in the mornings when the weather was kind. Katherine had chosen this place herself. No waiting list, no shared rooms. A team that knew Edmund's name, his routines, the way he liked his toast cut in triangles for reasons he couldn't explain anymore. Una visited on a Saturday. She brought bread, not from a gala, not from a store. Bread she had baked herself that morning at Sunrise Bakery, before her shift started, using the oven while Lorraine pretended not to notice. Edmund was sitting in the garden, a blanket across his lap. His hands were steadier now. His color was better. 3 weeks of meals, medication, and people who actually looked at him had done what 200 guests in a ballroom never bothered to try. Una sat beside him. She placed the bread on the small table between them. Edmund looked at it, then at her. His eyes searched her face the way they always did, reaching, not quite landing. You remind me of someone kind, he said. Una smiled. You told me that before, Edmund. Then it must be true. They sat together for an hour. Una told him about the bakery, about Betty, about how she was going to start culinary school in the fall. Edmund didn't track all of it. But he listened. He nodded in the right places. And when Una got up to leave, he reached out and held her hand for a moment. The way you hold something you don't want to forget. September. Una walked into the Piedmont Culinary Institute carrying a second-hand backpack and a new set of knives Lorraine had pooled money with 3 other bakery workers to buy. She found her station in the teaching kitchen, tied her apron, the same way she'd done 1,000 times, and looked up. This time, she wasn't serving. She was creating. That evening, she called Betty from the parking lot. "How was it?" Betty asked. "Terrifying. Amazing. I burned something in the first hour." Betty laughed until she coughed. "Your mama would have been so proud, baby." The next week, Katherine and Una had coffee. Not at Wilson Capital, not at a penthouse. At a diner on Broad Street with sticky menus and bottomless refills. Katherine said, "You changed how I see all of this." Una said, "You had the power to make things right. Most people with power don't." Katherine looked at her. "Most people without power don't use theirs the way you did." Una Green graduated from culinary school the following spring. Top of her class, 3 job offers before she walked across the stage. She turned all of them down. Instead, she opened a small bakery on the corner of Mill and Broad, 6 blocks from the apartment where she grew up. She called it Edmund's Table. The sign above the door was hand-painted. The menu was short. And taped to the register, in Una's handwriting, a small note read, "If you're hungry and can't pay, sit down. You're welcome here." Betty's lupus stabilized. She sat in the bakery every morning, in a cushioned chair Una bought just for her, watching customers come and go, telling anyone who'd listen, "That's my grandbaby." Katherine restructured her foundation. She created a permanent program to identify and support invisible acts of kindness in communities across the state. She named it the Edmund Wilson Initiative. One afternoon, a man walked into Edmund's table. He stood near the door, staring at the menu, hands in his pockets, not ordering. A young worker, a girl Una had hired from the neighborhood, brought him a loaf of bread, set it on the table, and sat down across from him. No one told her to do it. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you in the next story.
You know what I think? Being a good person isn't complicated. People make it complicated. They say, I will have when I have more. I will give when I'm stable. I will care when it's convenient. But that's not how it works. Being a good is simple. You see someone needs help, you help. You don't check your bank account first. You don't ask, what is it for you? You don't wait until it's easy. You just do it. With whatever you have, even if it's more, even if it's your last. That's it. That's the whole thing. It was never about money. It was never about titles or power or being rich enough to make a difference. It was always just about being a person to another person. Nothing more. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice every week. And remember, kindness doesn't need a reason. It doesn't need a reward. It just needs someone brave enough to go first.